Stories. And I'm here with David Campbell, and we're going to go with a song, and it's 23. I said songs, but you said psalms. And well, I said, is psalms the same as songs, the same word? Is it a synonym?
Well, to me it is.
Okay.
To me it is. And I got this idea of just flipping through one of the old Heavenly Highway hymn books that people used to use a long time ago in churches, and in this area still do. Just looking at the song titles and thinking about certain people that used to lead certain songs. It was their favorite song, and at the singing conventions and things that, you'd hear these old songs. And as I was looking at the titles, I realized you could tell a story by just linking these songs together, just the song titles. And I looked through there and just became inspired to link together some of the songs that I grew up with. And when I got through, I counted the song titles in it, and there were 23. So for a while, I called it my 23rd song. But I thought, well, that might be a little presumptuous.
For a preacher.
Well, there's another David that wrote the 23rd Psalm.
That's right.
And this David's writing 23 songs, titles. So people don't need to get those two confused, I guess. But I tied those together to tell a story. And people who are familiar with the old time songs that sing out of the old Heavenly Highway hymns books and that kind of a book, they'll recognize the song titles. And it turned out to be a neat little song. In fact, there's a singing group now, Lewis and Lewis, Ray and Laura Lewis, who travel all over the country singing, and they've been using this song as an introduction to their program, because people come out to hear gospel singing and they're familiar with the old ones, so they just cover 23 songs right here in just a couple of minutes, just with the song titles. And when you sing this, you can see people perk up because they know the next line, even though they've never heard the song, because they know the song title. And so they can almost sing along before they ever hear the whole song. So it just turned out to be a neat song.
That is wonderful. And tell me, where did you come up with that?
Oh, I don't know where I came up with that one, except as I often say, I think that songs are a gift from God.
I agree.
And outside of that, I can't tell you where I came up with that, except I just saw the song titles as I flipped through the old song book, and they just jumped out at me. And as I look at those song titles, I'd remember when I was a little kid, so-and-so would sing this song. This was so-and-so's favorite song. And I could remember my mom singing this song. She liked this song.
Oh, yeah.
And and go on through the song books, and it just became a real fun song to write. And it was easy to write because once you start writing something like that, you can think of another song to fill in the gap.
Right, yeah.
Starts out like, oh, how well I do remember. Well, that's not a song title there. Back in old camp meeting days, there was a song about old camp meeting days. We'd sing about a rugged cross.
Right.
And His amazing grace.
Right.
We'd sing Jesus paid it all, and His love lifted me.
Right.
I'll fly away. Oh, happy day. And He set me free. The old account was settled. Yep. Long ago down on my knees. Lord, I'm coming home, just as I am. Come unto me. Those are different songs, but when you put them together, they link together and they tell stories. He's the lily of the valley.
That's right.
Everybody ought to know, but I'd rather be an old-time Christian, Lord, than anything I know. And it just came together.
Do you sing that any of these at church?
Um, once in a while, yeah. You know, a lot of churches go with a different style of singing now, and I guess I'm old school. I guess that's why we're talking on old man stories.
Yep, that's right.
It's not young man stories. It's old man stories, and I write probably for older people. But yeah, we sometimes we sing some of these songs at other churches.
And did you ever take your guitar, put your strap on, and walk down the aisle?
Oh
and sing?
yeah.
Have you done it?
Sure have. Sure have. I like to do that, especially when people are caught up in that atmosphere where they like the songs and they like to sing and if you've just got 5 or 10 minutes, you might sing one verse of all these other songs, and it's kind of like, wow, we've been to an old time singing convention here in 10 minutes.
Isn't that nice?
Yeah, it is.
Okay,
It is neat.
okay. Well, that is really absolutely wonderful, and I envisioned you walking down the aisle with your guitar, singing, and
We've done that.
and watching and looking at the eyes of your parishioners, and getting that joy from them. That's pretty cool.
You know, you just said something that gives me a vision of what happens in these church services, and I remember an evangelistic team that used to travel through this area, and one lady would play the guitar and the other lady would sing, and they'd walk up and down the aisles, and people just enjoyed it so much. And there's a friend of mine who started out as a young preacher, 14 or 15 years old, and was really a good preacher. First year he preached over 100 times.
Wow.
About 14 or 15 years old. The next
That's
year he got with
a
it.
week, yeah.
Yeah, the next year he preached over 200 times. Yeah, that's something. And but walking up and down the aisles, you know, he told this story, and I guess if this doesn't really fit here, you can edit it out. But it's just such a funny story. He didn't have very much money, but he had got him an old camper that he was pulling behind his vehicle, and he'd go from place to place and just preach like a house of fire. I mean, like an old time preacher, and he was just a young teenager. He didn't have any money. He came to a yard sale, and he was needing some new shirts, but he didn't know what size shirts he wore, but these were brand new white shirts in a package, and he bought them for $0.25 apiece. Well, when he got back to his little camper trailer, tried them on, he probably wore a size 14, and these were 18s. Well, you know, it just swallowed him up. But he decided that if he would pull the sleeves up and pin them up here, the sleeves would be right. And if he'd fold all this up in the back and tuck it in, he keep his coat on, he could get by with it, you know, and pull this collar up, you know, and he got him a piece of elastic where he could go from one button to the other and keep his collars in place. And he had on one of those clip-on ties. So that night he got his guitar. When you said walking the aisle singing the guitar, he decided that he was going to sing before he preached, and he got that guitar and he started singing. I'm a Poor Rich Man, I believe was the name of the song, which was really fitting for him. And the people got so excited, and he'd walk down the aisle and he'd sing, and it had a couple of verses and a couple of choruses. And back in those days, you had to make a song last a long time, you know, to give the people their money's worth, so to speak. So he sung each verse 2 or 3 times and the chorus 2 or 3 times. And he'd walk down the aisle and he'd whirl around and go back up the aisle, and people were just really animated. Animated, I guess is the word for it. When he got through with singing that song, he laid his guitar down and opened his Bible and read his text, and he started saying a prayer before he preached, and for the Lord to help him preach. And the pastor came up behind him and he said, "Son, just keep praying." He said, "Your pants are unzipped, and the tail of that shirt is hanging plumb down to your knees. And just keep praying. And fix that for you. Step out from behind the pulpit." So this young man's, he's finishing up his prayer, but now all of the anointing and all of the excitement has left him, because here he has made a spectacle of himself in front of this whole audience. And he's behind the pulpit finishing his prayer and stuffing a half a yard of size 18 shirt back into his pants and zipping it up. He said, "Boy, you talk about losing the anointing." After the service, the pastor said, "Son, didn't you notice it?" He said, "Oh, no." He said, "I wouldn't have done that at all." He said, "Well, let me tell you." He said, "It was the funniest thing I've ever seen." He said, "You'd whirl around." And he said, "When you whirled around," said, "in just a second later, here would come the rest of that shirt tail and it would fly around." Oh, and that young man's a very, very famous evangelist today, doing great work.
That's wonderful.
But, funny things happen to us preachers.
Yeah.
Some things not so funny. Some things are not funny when they happen, but years later, looking back, they're funny.
Looking back, they're funny, yes.
Yeah.
Reflection is always adds humor.
Yes, and distance.
Yeah.
Distance is important.
Well, introduce your son.
My name is Dave Campbell, and this next song that you hear, I wrote from song titles from the old Heavenly Highway hymn book. And inside this song are 23 song titles. And see if you recognize any of them. It's called the 23rd Song.